Well, thank you, and thank you all for coming. For those of you that aren't familiar with Western Copper and Gold, Western Copper and Gold is a fairly straightforward story. We have one asset, and that is the Casino Copper Gold project located obviously up in the Yukon. I will be making forward-looking statements, so I encourage you to review this before you make any investment decision. Just to sort of get some of the financials out of the way, what are we in terms of size of company and cash and those sort of things. Mid-year we had about $5.5 million worth of cash. Since we're in permitting right now, we're not burning through money that quickly, so this is certainly sufficient money to last us a good year plus if need be. If you look at share price, market cap, we're sitting around 150 million market cap. Certainly that's up from a couple years ago and putting us in a relatively healthy space. Where are our shares? Management and board has about 8%. The bulk of those are with our chairman, who's here in the audience, Dale Corman. And then there's a group of high net worth individuals and really money managers that represent about 46% of the outstanding shares. These are people that we know well. There's maybe 6 to 8 names there that we're in constant contact with. There is a royalty in the project, 2.75% NSR. This was part of the package of royalties that was sold from a Cisco to Orion, or sorry, from Orion to a Cisco, and is now owned by a Cisco. And so we're very happy to have a Cisco as our new partner on this project. To sort of hit the highlights here, really we're talking about a large copper gold project, and to start off, the world needs more copper. If we look at the past 5 years, there's been a real dearth of new copper projects come online simply because the copper price was so low. If you look at the copper projects around the world, what you'll see is that most of the copper projects need not only $3 copper, which we're starting to see, but $3.50. As I'll show you with this project needs $2 copper. This is a project that's economic right now and in the foreseeable future. Large gold deposits are scarce. I mean, there's certainly lots of 1 and 2 million ounce deposits out there. I'm sure many of you have heard stories about them, and they're great little mines, but if you're talking significant size resources and if you're a major mining company, this is what you need to be considering. Economic large gold deposits are quite scarce. And last, a lot of these projects are in challenging locations, and the Yukon is, it's cold, but is actually not all that challenging. So here's the headline numbers. If you look at in the gold, 9 million ounces of gold in the reserve and 9 million ounces of gold in the inferred resource, so a total of 18 million ounces of gold in all categories. On the copper side, the total is 10 billion pounds of copper. So significant copper gold deposit. Starting off talking a bit about the copper market. For those of you that follow the copper market, this is a pretty sort of famous curve. It's produced by Wood Mackenzie. And really this is, the demand is the green line and the current supply is the blue and the red. And what this is saying is that we need to build more mines, we need to expand some of the existing mines. The thing that's interesting to me is you look at a decade from today. You look at 2027, and that's that green arrow that's shown there. 65 mines the size of Casino need to come online to supply that production gap. That's a significant amount of new copper that needs to come on. And that's based on a pretty conservative estimates of demand. That's a 1% global demand growth year over year. I mean, I could sit here and talk about electric cars and all these other sort of fun things, but I mean, really, this is a simple supply and demand equation on the copper and the fact that we need significant new copper projects coming on. And the thing about copper projects, I mean, we went through, and admittedly, I'm missing a few projects there. This is the copper space. You like the junior mining space, you want to invest in copper, that's all you got. There's about 12 names up there. This isn't like the gold market. I mean, I was flipping through and saying, looking at how many base metal companies are here at this event. There's maybe 3 or 4. I mean, there's not a lot of significant copper projects, period, let alone ones that are economic, or ones that are in good jurisdictions such as the Yukon in Canada. And and have good value. And this is sort of showing the enterprise value of Western compared to the pounds of copper equivalent in the ground. And you can see that we're sitting, very, very favorably compared to our peers. A bit about gold. This shows the amount of gold discovered globally over the past few years. And you can see as there's been a downturn, there's been a real lack of investment in the gold space. And so when you look at Casino, this is a significant gold deposit. Just the gold puts us double the size of Sabina's Back River. If you look at it in terms of gold equivalent, we're actually larger than Nova Gold's Donlin project. And certainly the value is there. And you look at, compared to our peers and other things out there in terms of enterprise value per ounce of gold equivalent in the ground, incredibly well valued. And I can't emphasize enough, this is a project that enjoys incredibly strong economics. And when I say that this works at $2 copper, you can see, the dot is at spot, and at spot here today, we're, 24% IRR and about a $2.5 billion net present value. But even at $2 copper and $1,300 gold, even when we start to see those levels, we still have a IRR that's comfortably over 15%, which is your typical target for investment. And we're well leveraged. You look at how our share price moves with copper and gold, and you can see if you go back, this starts in January 2016, gold goes up, we go up. You see Goldcorp buy our next door neighbors in Kaminak, we go up. You go look at the end of last year when copper sort of finally broke up to 250, we saw a big movement in the share price. And even recently, if you look at the end of the graph there, when copper sort of pushed into 3, we see our share price goes up. So significant sort of fluctuation with copper and gold price. Part of this, I think, is due to the fact we're listed in both Canada and the US, and that helps sort of move the price with the price of those commodities. So talk a little bit more about the team and sort of the history of us creating value for our shareholders. The team is shown there. I'm sure many of you in the room know Dale. He's been in the industry his whole life. Big win was with Western Silver, which he sold to Glamis for $1.6 billion in 2006. Myself, I've also been in the industry my whole life. Started with every career move goes to a smaller company. So and I guess the next time I'm here, I'll be working for a $5 million junior. But certainly a long history in the mining industry. Cam is really one of our key people. He was project manager for the Las Palambras mine when he was part of Bechtel. He's got big copper concentrator experience, and he brings that in to what we do. And then Julian, who despite his young looks, is actually a fairly seasoned CFO at this point in time. So the story, we spun out of that Glamis purchase of Western Silver in 2006. That was the beginning of 2006. The end of 2006, we acquired Lumina Resources. Should be a familiar name to a number of you. This is, again, Ross Beatty company, and Ross was actually co-chairman of the board for the first 4 years of the company. We got the project, we finished off the drilling, brought the drilling up to 100,000 meters. We did 2 pre-feasibility studies and then a full bankable feasibility study in 2013, and then entered permitting. And we've got about 3 years of permitting under our belt and have about another 3 to go. No projects move very quickly if you don't have appropriate social license, and it's something that's very important to us and something we've worked very hard on for this project. We've been up there for a decade. I know a lot of people. We work very closely with the communities in Whitehorse and Carmacks. And on the First Nation front, we enjoy a very good relationship with our First Nations. Worked with them. We have cooperation agreements with them in terms of how to move the project forward. But the really exciting announcement really happened over this last I guess, the Labor Day long weekend. And for those of you who haven't met the Minister, Ranj Pillai, who's in the audience, this is a lot of his hard work goes to his credit that this happened. And we had the Prime Minister and the Premier, and that's in the picture up there. come up to the Yukon and announce an infrastructure funding, and one part of that infrastructure funding is essentially a road to the casino mine. And that road, half of that road is going to be 100% government funded, and half of that road will be 30% government funded and 70% funded by Western Copper and Gold. So this was a tremendous announcement. This was something that created certainly a lot of excitement for us and a lot of excitement in the Yukon, and it really goes to show that not only the federal and territorial governments, but one of the things that people don't realize is that to get this funding from the federal government, the First Nations had to provide letters of support for this, so support from them as well in terms of the idea of this package and moving it forward. I'm not a geologist, so I don't have a lot of cross sections, but this just shows the deposit. It's sort of a conventional weathered porphyry. The cap has been depleted in copper and is enriched in gold. That's 157 million tons at 0.3 gram per ton gold. That's mined off first and thrown onto a heap leach. Beneath that is the bulk of the porphyry. And if you look at the first 4 years, quite a bit higher grade. That's 172 million tons at 0.7% copper equivalent. If you look at the overall reserve, 965 million tons at 0.5% copper equivalent. So that's the reserve. That's 22-year reserve. Beneath that is the inferred resource. We can put a pit around that inferred resource. When we look at that, it brings the mine life up to 55 years, and you end up mining most of that. So typical for these large porphyries, you're looking at a very long life project up here in the Yukon. Why does this add up so well? I always say there's a couple key things. One is the early high grade. We talked about that first 4 years at 0.7. The other is the strip ratio. At 0.59 to 1 life of mine, you're looking at a best-in-class strip ratio for these projects, for a large copper gold project such as this. That's our sort of secret sauce and really what helps the project go forward. Capital, I mean, big projects don't get developed for not big money, so capital is $2.5 billion, but what I'm showing here is a number of greenfield projects looking at capital intensity, so US dollars per ton of annual copper equivalent produced. And you can see that we're sitting essentially in the middle of the pack, which is where you want to see our capital cost fall. Last, I'm just going to sort of talk a bit about, because this is a copper gold mine, it's difficult to sort of picture, what would this be like if it was pure copper, pure gold. As a copper company, you're looking at, in terms of equivalent over the first 4 years, 500 million pounds of copper equivalent produced per year at a co-product cash cost at $1.50 per pound. As a gold mine, you're looking at over 1.1 million ounces of gold equivalent produced at a co-product cost of $670 an ounce. So, because it's a split between copper and gold, sometimes it's difficult to differentiate between, how does this stack up against those other projects, but you can see it stacks up pretty well when you look at it in terms of equivalent. And then the last thing I'll talk about here is a little bit about what's been happening in our area, and certainly a number of you are aware of the number of investments that have happened in the Yukon. Most of those investments have happened right in our backyard. When Goldcorp bought Kaminak, their claims touch our claims to the west. When Kinross and Agnico put together the White Gold Corp, that actually touches our claims to the east. So, I mean, in terms of all of this, of most of this investment that's happened in majors over the last little while, it's happened right in our backyard. So to summarize, we're looking at fundamentals of copper and gold being the strongest they've been in 5 years. Assets like a casino that have size and economics are really scarce. We have a very, very significant upside. I mean, you look at, the size of this resource, the net present value of, $2.5 billion at today's prices, and we're sitting at 150 million market cap, significant upside, and a proven history of creating shareholder value. Okay, and with that, I've got 30 seconds.
Quick question.
Quick question.
Anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
Michael.
Yeah, Paul, can you give us an idea of the material movement scale of the operation? How many tons are you moving per day?
Yeah.
Ore and waste?
Yeah, I'm a process engineer, so I only know the mill. The mill's 120,000 ton per day, but at a strip ratio of 0.6 to 1, you're looking, I guess, 180,000 tons per day. I mean, one of the things that I look at it in terms of comparison, because people look at northern projects, we'll be mining less than Detour and Malartic, just because of that low strip ratio, just to put it in comparison.